welcome to Media MD, your fortnightly Doof Network dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are back after just 2 weeks to talk about Mindhunter.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I only made it through season 1 for this. I was really hoping to fit in season 2 as well, because I know that's probably what everyone wants to talk about more, because it's more new. But unfortunately, I'm only prepared to talk about season 1.
That's all right. That's a fair assumption. 2 weeks to get through a season is still pretty good, especially a season of TV that I think is kind of defined by going slowly and deliberately. Mindhunter, I don't think, is a show that suits binging that well.
No, I watched a couple of episodes in pairs, but like never more than that. As you said, like it's not a binge show. It's a show I watched an episode of every day, or pairs of episodes on some days, and that felt like enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to get into the plot summary,
yep.
As we tend to do, we sort of touched on this in the prescription. It's loosely based on the story of the team that sort of formed the criminal psychology sort of department in the FBI, like starting to really sort of do in-depth criminal profiling.
Yeah.
That went beyond just a fairly basic understanding of people who are just naturally criminals.
Yes.
And people who have just sort of gone in, temporarily insane, I think is sort of how they phrase it. And they basically develop the concept of like psychopaths and sociopaths and serial killers. In fact, that's right at the end of season 1 is they invent the term serial killer.
Yep, they keep calling it sequence killers before
it sounds
right?
so wrong.
I know, it's so clunky of a phrase, but that's what it was. I don't know.
But like, I really like that as, again, it was a perfect embodiment of Holden's character. Because clunky and not very catchy is sort of him to a T.
Yeah.
So yeah, something I didn't realize until somebody actually pointed it out to me with this is a lot of the people they're meeting in this season are actually like real serial killers, not the actors, but it's actors playing actual famous serial killers. So there's a big one throughout a lot of the season. They're interacting with this serial killer called Ed Kemper.
Yeah.
Who is actually like a real serial killer. And in fact, somebody sent me a photo of the real Ed Kemper next to the actor, and they did an incredible job.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it? That's something that is very consistently great, is you look at the photos of these serial killers and the actors seem to have captured their mannerisms and their look. And, obviously this is, the makeup team and everything altogether, but it really does capture their vibe so well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It leads to this weird feeling where, I don't know if, I'm sure this is intentional. Mindhunter feels kind of like an evolution of the Netflix true crime drama. Things like, Making a Murderer and stuff like that, where this is kind of it's still dramatized, but in a very different way. I don't know. It's an interesting evolution of the format.
No, you're right. It's tapping into that same weird fact, which is that serial killers are so fucking captivating.
Yes.
And I don't know, I don't think I'm the only person who's like a little freaked out by how into serial killer stuff I get.
Yeah.
Like Serial, the podcast, obviously took off, so I know I'm not alone in this stuff. But like there's something so weirdly captivating about stuff that studies the psychology of people who are their minds are so fundamentally differently built to us. Like there's something alien and captivating about someone who's so detached from like certain parts of humanity.
Well, yes, and this is something that I think is interesting about this show is Holden Ford as a character is kind of a criticism of like serial killer obsession, right? Because he as a character is defined by, as the story progresses, he falls more and more into the world and the mindset of serial killers in a way that becomes quite creepy, right?
Yeah, definitely. We'll get there. I guess I'll just round out sort of the overarching plot summary, and then I want to dive into each character. So basically, sort of the more detailed plot is this guy called Holden ends up sort of teaching at FBI's like training center and starts to become obsessed with these ideas of criminal sort of profiles. In particular, there are these cases where there is, the FBI just says, oh, there is no motive. It's just people being crazy.
Yeah.
And Holden doesn't really buy that. And then he meets this girl, Debbie, who becomes his girlfriend for the whole rest of the season, who sort of steers him in this idea steers him in this direction of learning more about psychology to see if he can unlock what the motives are. This puts him in touch with the, grumpy old guy who runs the behavioral science unit at the FBI, which he joins, called Bill Tench. And together the two of them start to find examples, mostly Ed Kemper, of this kind of third class of criminal whose motives the FBI currently can't explain. They team up with an academic professor named Wendy Carr. And the three of them start to form what ends up being quite a successful project to start to classify the behaviors of serial killers and bits of their sort of general trends and stuff.
Yeah.
And mixed in among all that, their personal lives come into it, or sometimes lack thereof. And so it's kind of I think really the show is a character study of the three of them, probably primarily Holden. And you touched on this in the prescription, like the serial killer stuff is the setting that is used to drive the character study of these three.
Yeah, definitely. It is about the way that they are navigating basically a new field. And so it's a lot of my favorite parts are just the ways that they have to evolve their processes over time in order to try and maintain some level of consistent science around what they're encountering, which has kind of defied previous understanding.
Yeah, and like there's some good fun dramatic irony built around that, because I think, and maybe this is just because I've watched so much other serial killer stuff, but you hear things like the bedwetting or stuff like how Ed Kemper was obsessed with law enforcement, and that's something we'll touch on later. This idea that there's often a tie between these sorts of criminal psychopaths and law enforcement, and like all this stuff that is kind of so inherently tied to serial killer lore in my mind, and sort of getting to watch them sort of discover it was kind of fun. Like I feel like there was some, I don't know if dramatic irony is quite the right word, because it more felt like I had knowledge they didn't, and I was enjoying watching them learn it as opposed to watching it screw them over, which I feel is like how I usually use dramatic irony. Maybe I'm just using the term wrong.
Yeah, no, I do think it is. There's the knowledge that we as the audience have that the characters just don't have. Like the word serial killer.
It's a good example. And obviously something that the show does a lot is, it's set in, I think the mid to late 70s. And so, a lot of other people and the FBI institution are not as progressive as they could be.
Yes.
So the show gets to build a very good sense of like they're fighting a shit system. Like it's the way a lot of people go about dismissing them that makes their cause feel extra virtuous, despite some of the skeevier parts of it. Because we know they're right, and we know that these other people are just being kind of intolerant assholes about it. So it makes it easier to just get on side with them. I think that these three characters are all ones that ascribe to pretty modern value sets, right? Especially Wendy, who is an academic, and so it's really easy to take their side against what is still quite a unfair and unequal world. Although I love I like Holden and Bill are sort of more interesting in that in some ways they're very traditional. Or Holden, I wouldn't call him traditional as much as just maybe naive. And Debbie has a lot to do with breaking him out of that. But as we sort of touched on, this is a show that I felt was really about these three core people: Holden, Bill, and Wendy. And I really liked the dynamic between the three of them, because I think once it got far enough to the point where all three of them were working full-time on this project, which is, only halfway through the season, there was really interesting office politics just between the three of them, because all three of them had very different ideas about what exactly the project was trying to achieve and what the right way to go about it was. I thought it was, sometimes it just felt like it was so messy, but then I sort of realized that that's kind of the point, is like these three were just at the same time on the same page, but also on very different pages, like on how they should achieve this shared goal.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the three of them versus the world, but then it also definitely has the aspect of, Holden is really basically just fluking his way through the dark, and obviously has some natural talent that allows him to succeed in that. Whereas Wendy and Bill are trying to play things safer and more structural in a very interesting way. And they all play off each other very interestingly because of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, and Wendy's so academically focused. Holden is sort of, as you said, really wants to make a big difference and kind of is stuck on this idea of the preemptive nature of it. And then Bill just kind of sees that, Holden's right. There's something here that the FBI doesn't have. And I kind of think he doesn't want to overhaul things as much. He just wants to fill in a gap that he sees that the FBI has, whereas the other two are a bit more revolutionary about the whole thing.
It seems that Bill's motivation is actually just trying to prevent or solve crimes, right? Whereas the other two are kind of on a whole other wavelength.
Yeah, exactly. And those two are on different wavelengths from each other as well. So like just that sort of friction between the three of them as they also simultaneously work together against everyone else, it like really makes the show more engaging than it would be otherwise, I think.
Yeah. So of the three, who's your fave?
I mean, it feels a bit boring because he's obviously the main focus, but I found Holden probably the most captivating. I mean, his name's Holden Ford, so I'm a little bit annoyed that they didn't make him a car person.
For those of you not in the know, those are two Australian car brands, and that is what he's named after, which is a bit weird, but really? Once you get past that...
I wasn't sure if that was on purpose or not. But yeah, he... I mean, obviously, a huge part of Holden's arc is that towards the end, as you said, he sinks into this world a bit much. And honestly, I think there's even implications, like something that is very sort of common parlance in a lot of the serial killer stuff on TV is this idea that a lot of these serial killers are naturally drawn to law enforcement because it shares a lot of the same power dynamic sort of emphasis, and obviously, can help them avoid crime. So I felt like there was this undercurrent of an implication throughout the whole season that Holden was maybe a bit further along this serial killer spectrum than anyone around him realized. Like particularly the way the emphasis of the first half of the season is just how this stuff doesn't really seem to faze him.
Yeah.
And this starts to manifest in the second half by him becoming kind of overly confident and risk-taking and displaying more and more of the symptoms of one of these sociopaths, basically.
Yeah, to the extent that he's able to kind of slip into the mindset of a sociopath in order to kind of convince them that he's one of them. And he does that very convincingly.
Yeah, exactly. It gets to that point where, like, Bill... I think there's a quote where Bill's just sort of like, I think you're thinking in the right direction, but I'm uncomfortable with how easily you're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's basically the vibe of the second half of the season, is this idea of getting into these people's heads is important for solving the crimes, but it's a very dangerous line to walk, and that's, I'm assuming, where Holden's arc might be going in season 2, because he's stepped way past that line from the looks of it. I mean, the season ends with Ed Kemper like hugging him and saying that they're very similar and they're friends, and he kind of like seemingly just has a panic attack as a result.
Yeah, it's the most intense hug that has ever existed. It's so fucking terrifying.
Well, yeah, I was genuinely unsure whether Ed was going to kill him or not, and then it was a hug, and I was like, "Oh, this is even better."
Yeah.
I mean, the only other thing I could sort of see Holden maybe doing in season 2 is this idea of him trying to recover, and it would be really fun because I think Bill would be the person to lead him out of that, and that'd be a really fun sort of return to the mentor-mentee dynamic they started with early on, but in a very different flavor.
Yes, definitely. Completely different flavor. I think Holden is such an interesting character. And, I don't know how well I can speak to this, but I think his character is basically the result of David Fincher, the creator of this show, kind of putting himself into this world a bit. David Fincher is a notorious perfectionist and kind of pushes the envelope on his films in a lot of ways. And I think I've read a lot of stuff about how Ford is kind of a reflection of Fincher's thoughts about himself in a different field.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I don't know much about David Fincher, but like I can totally see sort of what you're getting at. Like,
You know what you need, Elliot? You need some kind of series deconstructing all of David Fincher's works. More on that later.
Wherever would I find such a thing? Yeah, no, I can sort of see that, because you're right. Holden feels like an exploration of what being meticulous in this sort of field leads to.
Yeah.
And as I sort of touched on, I think there's also a subtle undercurrent there that he was maybe already heading in this direction on some level. And because, something that this show even briefly addresses, and something I've read articles on in the past, is the idea that, a lot of CEOs exhibit similar symptoms to some serial killers. Like, it's this whole idea of, it depends basically on your upbringing, where you end up. And so I could see an implication that Holden is just on the CEO side.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I very much enjoyed watching Holden's descent in this season alongside his victories, and I'm keen to see where he goes in season 2. I think about halfway through these 2 weeks, the news came out that season 3 is kind of indefinitely on hold.
Yeah.
So that was a
sad
bummer.
news. Yeah. If you hadn't heard that, basically, David Fincher has got some other projects that he's really excited about, and so in what is, probably the right move, he's released the cast from their contract so that they can do other stuff while he's doing other stuff. Doesn't mean that the show is dead, but it is a step towards it. It's basically a step away from season 3 happening soon.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the actors being off contracts isn't good, because then if they get other contracts, then it makes it harder to schedule.
Yes.
And obviously, David Fincher was not unsuccessful before Mindhunter, but if he's getting more and more projects, he's I don't think he's going to be wanting for projects at any point.
Yes, although I do think this was something that he championed and that he found very interesting. So it's not. It's not necessarily that Netflix won't be able to get him back. I do think this is a show that he holds a lot of love for. It's just, after you've worked on something for 2 years and you have a theoretical 5 seasons planned, it gets harder and harder to keep going for those 5, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't know there was a plan like that. That's cool. So I guess moving on from Holden to the next character, who I think we should talk about while we're talking about Holden, which is Debbie, who is only really in the story to sort of further Holden's story.
Yep.
I don't know. Debbie never really clicked for me. I don't know what it was. I saw the point of her in like episodes 1 and 2, where she kind of met Holden, broke him out of his shell a bit, and started steering him in this direction of psychology. And then from then, she was kind of included just to highlight how he was changing. And I guess it was sort of, maybe, for me, it was just sort of so clear where it was all going, that he was changing and their relationship wasn't working for most of it. I just kept questioning why they were still together. And I don't know, there was something about her character that just never really clicked for me.
I didn't dislike her character, but it did demonstrate to me another serial killer trope that is exhibited by Holden, I guess, which is just that he's not good at having relationships with women. And that was very clear in his relationship to Debbie, where he was never really a very good boyfriend. And it was kind of clear that they weren't going to work out, just because, I don't know, they just never seemed to have chemistry,
Yeah, you're right. That was definitely something I picked up on as well. Like, I never really believed their relationship. And I agree with you that I think a lot of that may have been intentional.
I don't think it's disbelieving their relationship. I think it's seeing what their relationship is,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they obviously had a lot of respect and admiration for each other, but it was kind of clear to me watching it that it was just kind of like, these two people, you don't have to be in love to start to be in any relationship, but it was very clear that they just didn't click with each other, huh?
Yeah, well, in the season, I'm not sure exactly how long it's meant to, go over, but, it's at least months, maybe over a year.
Yeah.
And... the relationship goes from a kind of nice honeymoon phase to just feeling like it's not working quite quickly, and they just sort of struggle through it for a very long time. Kind of only, really, I think the reason the relationship survived as long as it did is probably just because Holden was traveling so much.
Yeah, they didn't have a chance to confront each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So moving on to a more positive note, someone who kind of had the opposite effect on me was Bill.
Yeah.
So Bill Tench. I think an episode or two in, I was very unenamored by Bill's character, and that kind of quickly reversed the more we saw of him. It was painful to watch the sort of old stereotype of a cop who's trying to be a good soldier and is tanking his family because he refuses to communicate.
Yes.
But that was, in a way that I think the show wanted me to be frustrated by watching that plotline. Like, it's a trope for a reason. It's kind of, it gets under your skin.
Yes, he definitely has that kind of conservative view of masculinity, which is it's all about, I have to bear the load of this family and make, and it's that kind of noble but dangerous idea,
Yeah, noble but stupid. And like everyone tells him so. And it kind of takes, there's this one scene, I think it's like in episode 8, where he kind of finally breaks down and like kind of yells at his wife, but you can tell he feels bad that he yelled at her, but she's just glad he's finally fucking talking to her. Yeah. And there's mentions of therapy around then, and I kind of got the impression that on the DL he'd maybe started doing stuff like that, because there's a huge turnaround in his attitude and kind of mental health from there. So I think maybe he finally overcame that, but just wasn't quite advertising it.
I absolutely love Bill. He's my favorite character by far, and I can't comment too much because it's a little blurry for me what is season 1 and what is season 2, but God, he's just so great. I just love him so much.
He's so like one thing, Wendy isn't introduced till episode 3 or 4, but she doesn't properly join until about episode 5, and so the show's really driven by just Holden and Bill's relationship for most of the first half of the season, and it's very good. Like, their dynamic, particularly in the first couple of episodes, is great. Bill's like kind of just reluctance to engage in Holden's keenness, it was a very fun dynamic. Like, Holden was such this Boy Scout, like, let's go and do all the stuff, and Bill's kind of tired old, no, fuck you, I'm going to play golf. Was simple but effective, and then it made that moment where he finally stands up for Holden to Shepard, the boss at the FBI, like, even more powerful.
Yeah. I think Bill is very grounded and an old school cop, but one who definitely is there to, elevate the world, right? And he is kind of noble. And that's the thing I like the most about him, is he's slow to change, but he is very noble.
Yeah, exactly. And he has those moments where he does seem to change because he realizes that, some of his old ways aren't good, and that's very endearing, obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
And so then, I guess the other big character is Wendy Carr. So played by Anna Korv from Fringe, which I don't know if you mentioned in the prescription.
I can't remember if I did or not, but she's great. She is so great in the show, and the casting in the show is excellent.
Yeah. And very, very different character though she played in Fringe as well. Like, showing off her range here. As I said, we've already touched on this. I love the third dimension she brought to the dynamic of the behavioral sciences team.
Yeah.
In saying that, I don't feel like we've really dived into her character much yet, like, because she only came in halfway through the season. Like, there were a few things that were established. Obviously she leaves her like long-term girlfriend, from the looks of it, to join this team because she sort of believes in how right it is, and that's sort of a bit of a trend in this team is putting the work before your personal life. And then, like, apart from that, all we really kind of see of her on a personal level is this cat she's starting to feed. So that hasn't gone anywhere yet, but I'm expecting it will in season 2.
Wendy is an interesting character because she is defined by her kind of reclusiveness, right? She is gay and very protective of that fact because she, I think quite rightly, knows that the more people that know about it, the harder it will be for her to work in what are already difficult conditions as a woman in the FBI, right?
Yeah, and like, given a lot of the talk we see from the FBI in this show,
she's 100% right.
Assuming that they're going to be very homophobic, I think is spot on. So you're right. Like, she is a very private person for very sort of understandable reasons. But like, I guess I'm interested to see more of her because I loved the way she interacted with Bill and Holden, but I at the same time, I haven't gotten enough of a feel for just her as an individual yet, I don't think.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you will see more of her in season 2.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we've gone over all the main characters, so I can kind of just say, man, they're all so good, right? Like, this is, of course, a show that is driven by the strength of its characters, and they're all so compelling to watch.
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, that was what really drew me in for this, was the core characters and kind of following their journey. Having serial killers be a part of it is some nice dressing, but like, you're not here for the serial killers. You're here for the personal lives of these three.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess something I feel like we should address. I don't know. Like, I noticed a number of people in our Discord talking about this show, mentioning how beautiful it is and the cinematography and stuff. I don't tend to notice that stuff. I'm not an overly visual person, I guess. So there are a few moments where I was like, oh, that's really cool and that's a really nice shot, but it maybe just because of my personal inclinations didn't affect me as much as other people. But like, I guess that's a point that should probably be brought up, because it seems everyone else does.
Yeah, I guess the thing to touch on for that for me is this is a show that is obviously quite slow and deliberate, and I think a key part of that is the atmosphere that the show cultivates, right? And not just, obviously the tension and the atmosphere in the interactions with the serial killers like Ed Kemper is, you can taste it, right? It's very, it works very well. But even in other scenes, you mentioned the scenes where Wendy is, interacting with this cat that is in the kind of laundry room of her building.
Yeah.
And I can, weirdly, of all the scenes in the show, her in this basement, kind of with this hole in the wall, kind of above her head height, is one of the images I can picture so clearly. And I think that's what makes this show so great, is even in the, the serial killer stuff is good, sure, but put that aside, and the parts of the lives of these characters outside of this are captured in a way that is so atmospheric and so, captivating, right? And I think that's in part due to the cinematography and just the entire experience. It really it drains your life and focus into this story.
Yeah, you're right. Because like, while I may not be consciously aware that a lot of this stuff is there and is like affecting me, like it still does, like as you said, there are certain scenes like I can. The original scenes with Ed Kemper, where Holden first goes into the prison alone, are kind of seared into my brain.
Yeah.
And I'm not versed enough in sort of, film study to know why that is. But like, it is surely stuff like that, because I can remember like everything about that scene, the use of silence as well as music and everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's. Yeah, like I'm sure that stuff is still there, and you're right. Like the evidence of that not being able to consciously process it is just how there are a bunch of scenes that I can picture so vividly.
Yeah. I don't think that's just the cinematography, but I think it's one of these tools in the tool belt that make it again work so well.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of everything I had to talk about. Like I did really get into this show. I think maybe it suffered a little bit because of our format. It was one of those situations where I was running a bit behind and did kind of have to force myself to watch more than I naturally would have to try and fit the season in the 2 weeks, which is a bit of a bummer, because like I want to watch things to enjoy them, not because of a time limit.
Yeah.
But this isn't the first thing that's happened to, and so I don't know. Like I really enjoyed it, but there's also since having finished it, how some things just stay in your brain for weeks after you've watched it. I don't think this has been one for me, and I'm not sure why, because I very much enjoyed it at the time. But then it's one of those things where when I'm not watching it, it hasn't stuck in my brain like other things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I kind of get that vibe as well. I don't think maybe it will stick in your brain more from the second season, because I think the second season is even better than the first season. But you're right. I can't quite put my finger on it either. But you're right that it doesn't do anything that I think is incredibly transformative. As a show.
Yeah,
I think it is incredibly well made, but it is
absolutely,
and it's a very captivating story and all of this stuff. But you're right that maybe it's because it's not doing anything viscerally different.
Yeah, that might be it. Because I completely agree. It's very solid, but I just noticed that it was one of those shows where when I wasn't watching it, I wasn't sort of thinking about it all the time. Whereas there have definitely been other things for this podcast where every second I'm not watching, reading, or listening to it, I'm still sort of thinking about it. And while I so enjoyed this, it didn't have that same sort of captivating my life feeling that some other things have had. Not really a negative, just kind of something I noticed.
So with all of that in mind, Elliot, what do you give Mindhunter on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah, so I think for season 1, I'm going to go with an 8.
Okay.
Yeah, like I really enjoyed this. I'm definitely going to be watching season 2. And very, very, very solid. Like as we've sort of touched on. Plus serial killers, they're weirdly engaging.
Yeah, you just get into that Holden Ford mindset, don't you? But yeah, 8, respectable. So that was Mindhunter. Now for something completely different. Let's talk about what we were going to do next fortnight. And I know we make this joke every single time, but thanks, Scott, for sitting there silently while we recorded that episode.
Hey, no problem. It was really hard not to speak up.
Yeah, but, you did good. You did good. Those of you who don't know, Scott is one of the original letters that create the Doof brand. So that's fun.
That's true. I'm the first letter.
Yeah, the best one, I guess.
Therefore the best. Yeah.
First in the word, first alphabetically. So yeah. Anyway, Scott Daly from a bunch of Doof podcasts. Thank you for coming on.
Yes. I just want to jump in quickly and do Scott's job for him and say Kingslingers is his latest show.
Yes.
And everyone should go check it out.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember when this thing we're recording right now is airing, but we're probably a few episodes deep into that by now, and it's going great, I can confidently say.
Yes, I think episode 2 will come out the same day as this episode.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that is our podcast going deep into Stephen King's Dark Tower series that Matt and I are doing, and we're so excited about it, and it's going to be great. So if you like Stephen King and the Dark Tower, you should listen to that. And even if you don't, you should read it, and we'll teach you why you should like it.
So is that...
I've just started reading to keep up with the podcast, and I can't wait.
Awesome.
So is that what we're here to talk about today? You're going to prescribe us some Stephen King?
No.
That would have been a good idea, though. Oh, man, synergy.
It would have been really good synergy, because there's actually a lot of good Stephen King adaptations that have been made recently. So maybe a future episode will do that. But today... I am here to bring you the 1979 sci-fi horror film directed by Ridley Scott, Alien, the first in there's like 6 now, of the Alien series of movies. And so the reason should I tell the story, Elliot, or is this too embarrassing for you?
No, it's fine. I'm getting used to it.
So Elliot, we do some bonus content for some of our patron supporters at Doof Media. That's patreon.com/Doof Media. And one of the things,
brand there.
One of the things we were doing is Elliot was doing a run of the video game Alien Isolation in VR, and Elliot was playing the game and streaming to our patrons, and I was listening in, and it became very apparent to me that Elliot didn't know anything about Alien. And that's a movie or a game that kind of follows not the plot, but the style of the Alien movie very closely. And I was shocked to learn this, because I honestly just assumed that literally everyone on the planet had seen at least the first 2 Alien movies. But then I was told that neither of y'all have, it's just crazy. So I thought Alien is one of the best. I would comfortably put it in one of the top 10, maybe 15 movies of all time. It's one of the absolute best horror sci-fi combination type movies. It is incredible and wonderful. Like, Ridley Scott as a director, I have a very mixed opinion on, but this is undoubtedly his best work by far. It is a really great movie, and it is frankly absurd that you guys have not seen it.
One of my favorite...
I should preface this. I have a bit of experience with the series beyond playing a video game I was not prepared to play. I have seen Prometheus.
Yes, me too.
I think we saw it together, actually, Reuben, maybe.
That makes me so mad. I do not like that movie at all.
I did not enjoy it at the time either. It was a bit of a mess.
Yeah. It is. All the ways in which that movie is terrible this movie is incredible. And one of the things that I'm most interested from the two of you is like how much you know about this movie already, having not seen it, because I feel like Alien is just like such a cultural presence. Like, I'm assuming you already know what the alien looks like. You probably know how it works generally.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I
know its entire life cycle.
I know the babies come out of your chest, because obviously that happened to John Hurt, because he went on to play Doctor Who, so that was a big joke in the fandom when that happened. I also know the alien looks like a honey jumble, which I think is an Australian biscuit, as I'm saying it, so that probably means nothing.
What the hell?
I'm pretty sure I've watched like a 30-minute YouTube video about HR Giga. I think, was it, who designed the alien? Somebody.
Yeah. Not just the alien. A lot of the aesthetic of the cosmic horror side of this movie is right out of Giger's imagination. It's really remarkable, actually.
Yep.
It's just so creepy and wonderful. I love it.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that part of this movie a lot. And also, of course, I know that the alien has a long-standing rivalry with the Predator, presumably, but I've never seen either of the Predator movies.
We don't pretend that ever happened.
Oh, we don't talk about that. Okay.
No, we don't talk about that in the Alien fandom.
Okay. That one's non-canonical.
And of course, you have to know the star of this movie, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is obviously big Sigourney Weaver. Historical, impact that she had on that.
She kind of defined a science fiction archetype in this movie, right? Yes. Like all of the other. I'm thinking of. I think it's Galaxy Quest that is.
Well, that was her. Like, I think we specifically in our Galaxy Quest episode mentioned how great it was to get Sigourney Weaver to play the sort of bimbo-esque character in the show, despite having not actually seen Alien, even though we knew that that's what they were kind of inverting there.
Yeah, totally. I can't wait to talk. I have a lot to say about her performance in this movie and what she does, and just like all the characters in this movie are really, really interesting. Obviously, this is a horror movie. It's about people fighting against this big scary alien, but the things it's doing with the characters, the kind of science fiction it is, I think that's one thing that I'd like y'all to keep in mind as you're watching this movie, that this was 1979. Star Wars had come out not too long before this, but people didn't make science fiction the way this movie is made. It's very dirty and grungy. It's like very working class. Like this is a blue collar ship. This is not the military. This is not like sleek 2001 A Space Odyssey type of science fiction, and it's so fascinating. So keep that in mind as you watch it.
I mean, one of my favorite movies is Blade Runner, which is obviously not far off this one in terms of time and different obviously, but like I think I'm going into this expecting something similar in the way I'll see it defining a lot of stuff I've seen since, I guess.
Yeah. I think that would be extremely fair.
Yes. So
I'm trying to think what else I know. I know like we obviously know Sigourney Weaver plays Ripley, and I know thanks to Alien Isolation that the ship is called the Nostradamus, something like that.
The Nostromo.
Close.
Is the name of the ship.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
But I actually don't really know the general plot. I know there is an alien. It's horror, so I assume the alien is attacking them. But I actually don't exactly know what to expect from the plot.
Okay, great. I think you're going to be like, the one thing I think about this movie is it is definitely a movie from the 70s, but I think it's a movie that has aged remarkably well. Just the look of it, the style of filmmaking. Like this won a special effects Oscar that year, and it still holds up. How many years later is it now? God, it's so many, like 40 years later.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think it is one of those movies that stands the test of time and works on you in that same way. So I think it's important and genre defining in its day, but is one of those ones that still stands up today as well. So I'm excited. I'm really excited.
I think the only Ridley Scott things that I've ever seen are Prometheus, which I didn't enjoy, and one of my favorite things that we've talked about on this very podcast, which is The Good Wife, which was executive produced by Ridley Scott, right?
Yeah, well, that doesn't count. That
just
means he put his name on it.
I think Ridley and one of his brothers maybe were the funders, and then that's why that.
So that gives me a scale
he did. Yeah, that's a wide berth.
Well, yeah, and the thing that Ridley Scott was more closely associated with, Prometheus, was the one I liked a lot less. So let's see.
Yeah, no, obviously, as I said, Blade Runner is one of my favorite movies, and that's obviously another. Sure. That was his next movie, I think. So I'm very keen for this.
Great. Well, I can't wait to hear what you guys think. I assume you're going to absolutely love it, and we're not going to do any more of this nonsense 7 out of 10 that you gave my last movie. So
we'll see. We'll be back in a fortnight to talk about it, and we'll see what we thought. We'll be back then. So I guess in 2 weeks we'll come back to talk more about Alien. But for now, that's the end of our show. So thanks for tuning in. If you want to give us your thoughts on Alien, if you're watching it along with us, or hey, on Mindhunter, why not? A great place to do that is by tweeting at us at MediaMD Podcast on Twitter.
Yes, if you can as well, leave us a rating and a review on iTunes, Stitcher, podcast provider that you use,
Spotify.
Because that tells them that you like it, and then they'll tell other people that they should like it.
Yes.
And it's all a big sort of MLM scheme to spread the podcast.
Yes. Speaking of leaning on your comments, if you want to get in touch with us about a thing that you'd like us to check out, or just comment on the show in general, there are a few ways to do that. You can send us an email at mediamdpodcast@gmail.com, or if you head to mediamdpodcast.com, you can actually leave us a little voice memo that we'll include on the show as a little prescription for something.
Yeah, we've actually just received a couple of those. So
yes.
We might be doing some more, patron-based, or not even patron, just listener-based prescriptions. We did our first one with the Cabin Pressure, and that was a big hit, so we're excited to do more.
Yes, definitely. I've finished that since we did the episode, so I'm excited to talk about that more in the future at a later date. Now, you mentioned
probably
Patreon.
Around July.
Yeah, exactly, in July. You mentioned Patreon, Elliot. How can people get on board with that? What is it? Explain it to me.
I'll just talk around it. So if you head to patreon.com/doofmedia, that's where you can support Media MD, Kingslingers, which we just talked about with Scott, all of Scott's other shows, all of, Do the Right Thing and our other show, Deep Impact. None of these shows would exist in the format they do without the patrons.
Yeah.
That's 100% a true fact.
Yes.
Saying it like that made it feel like it's not. It is, though.
It is, 100%.
Go support us in any way you can. There's a bunch of tiers. For the $1 one, you're not only getting access to the Discord, but you're helping us reach our future goals. So Kingslingers, Scott's new show, is the result of people just signing up to the Patreon.
Yes, by interesting coincidence, one of the other Doof Media podcasts, the Doofcast, is currently doing a long-running series where they deconstruct each of David Fincher's films. I think they're one in, and we're about to do maybe Zodiac or Seven, one of the two really big crime ones that definitely inspired Mindhunter in a lot of ways. So that's fun. Go listen to that, why not?
Yep. So and as we sort of already touched on with Scott, the one that we've already covered is Alien 3. So there's lots of Alien content for you out there right now, as well as David Fincher content.
Yeah, it's great. So all of that stuff we mentioned, the Twitter, whatever, contact us, the Patreon, all that good stuff, you can find on doofmedia.com, which is also the new home of all of the clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why is he so creepy. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this fortnight's clue?
Soup.
And we'll see you next fortnight.